Hello and welcome to the Actual Magicians. Yes, I am an Actual Magicians bookshelf channel, where today in episode 9 of our series of top 100 tarot and oracle decks, I'm going to be covering a number of decks that haven't been covered in the previous 1 to 80 that we've done so far. So this will be deck number 81, and in this particular session, I'd also like to give you a warning about tarot that might not be the warning you expect, I guess. It's not something about tarot being evil or summoning spirits. It's worse. It's worse than that. And that is, can you tell the difference between these two decks? And I hope that that is an obvious thing. This is the Light Seers Tarot by Chris Ann. It was produced in 2019. And a lot of the decks that I'm going to cover in this last 20 are what I would call more recent decks. So I haven't used them as much as I would want, as I've used a lot of the others. Some I have, some I haven't, because I like to use a deck for maybe 10 years, something like that, before I feel that I've got to really know the deck. So this was 2019, so at the time of recording, that's about 5 years ago. But already, unfortunately, the deck has been pirated. And you can see on the back here, there's something that you can tell immediately. Not only is the size really terribly small, but we have the QR code here that takes you to a dodgy site full of illegal, copyright infringing PDFs of different decks that whoever has pirated this deck has taken. And there's a lot of other differences. Not only is the size, but the quality. You can tell the colouring is different as well. It lacks some of the detail because usually it's a scan of a deck. So I don't particularly like even using these decks, because to me they generate an icky energy in me. I wouldn't say that the deck has an icky energy, but the actual illegality of it has an icky energy. And we can see the difference between the two cards here. This one is smaller. Sometimes the cutting is off slightly. It lacks some of the detail. It often lacks the shading. It lacks the clarity, particularly in any text and so forth. It has a duller sheen, and sometimes you can tell that it's been scanned very easily. So again, please do take care when you're buying decks that you only buy the original deck itself. And best way to do that is often through the publisher, through the author, designer, artist's websites themselves. And there are certain sites that are more, shall we say, renowned for holding illegal copies of books and decks than others. Although it has become prevalent on Amazon of late as well. So often just check that the deck that you're getting is the original deck, and then say I'll put a link to the article that I wrote on this subject as well, with some examples of how you can tell about a deck or not. So enough of that. And you'll miss things like the wonderful design, things like the inside of the box as well here. And into the grey we follow like 1,000 flickering stars, and there in the sunlit hollow we lose and find what is ours. It's nice. So this is deck number 81, and Chris Ann also has another deck called the Muse Tarot, which out of the two I prefer the Light Seers Tarot, but I just thought I'd mention that. I've not used this one at all, and so I like to really review and talk about decks that I've actually used for a while. And so this will be a bit more of a show and tell, I guess, for some of the decks that I've not used as often. So deck 81, nice guidebook. Again, you don't get this in the pirated copy. You might get a terrible incomplete scan PDF. That might also come with some free viruses for you if you download it off a dodgy website. And it may not even be the PDF for that particular deck as well. So you're missing out an awful lot for just usually a difference of not much money. And again, it is illegal. It's totally illegal, of course, to be doing that. And it takes from the designers, it takes from the artists, it takes from the publishers as well, who support the artist and designer in publishing their deck in the first place. So this is the Light Seers Tarot, and I love the sort of casual nature of it, I think, more than anything. It's very contemporary, I would say. Being quite old now, I guess this counts as contemporary for me. So it's got some wonderful design choices. It's semi-Waite-Smith, but not entirely beholden to the Waite-Smith Tarot. And I just love the energy of it. I just absolutely adore the energy of this. It also made for some good illustrations in an article as well. It's very clearly designed. I love the Snuffles here. It even makes it onto the Queen of Wands in a contemporary deck. Snuffles has the most lives of any cat that I know. Snuffles. The King of Wands. Again, we've got the astrological symbolism sort of in it. I love the tats here. Ace of Cups. And the energy is really clear. It's a good reading deck, this. Three of Cups. I like the Celtic loop work here on the tattoo. I think strangely enough in this deck, this is possibly my own significator for this deck. And again, it's very, very contemporary. I like the idea of justice, having a sense of a reversed form of justice as well. Might be quite interesting to experiment with this deck for reversals. The Hanged Man reversed really gives a very different flavour and illustration. So this is Chris Ann's Light Seers deck, the back, and it's already in my top 100 favourite tarot decks. I'm not sure I quite trust, no disrespect to the Knight of Cups, but I'm not quite sure I trust the Knight of Cups there. But it's that sort of response that you get with a deck that tells you if it's going to be a good deck for you or not. That you get a sort of visceral response to the images and to the... Oops, let me just hold that up there like that so you can see it. Isn't that a great Three of Swords? And again, the tattoo is picking up on the design as well. So that's a clever design choice to use tattoos as part of the design. And the Ten of Swords there, even though there are no swords apparent, you've just got that Ten of Swords feeling from it. I love the storytelling of this. It does look like the end of the story, a conclusion, but there's something new as well. There's the 10 is leading back to the ace, it's cycling round, so there's a sense of leaving everything behind, but the future being totally unknowable as well. So I love this deck. And one of the things, again, with the top 100 is they cannot be listed in really their top 100 sequentially, because quite often I get to use a deck and I see it and it becomes my top deck while I'm using it. It becomes my favourite deck. And this is one of those decks that I just fell in love with immediately, want to use a bit more often. So it's out on my reading cycle of decks at the moment, my live cycle of reading decks, and perhaps I'll experiment with it with some dream work as well. I get the sense that that might be useful for that. I'm not quite sure yet. So this is the thing with the top 100 decks, particularly as we come down to the, I guess, 81 to 100. And some of these decks would do well in some of the other areas. For example, the photography set of decks that I looked at, the historical set of decks, the self-development set of decks, the magical set of decks, and so forth. So some of these last 20 will fit into those categories as well. So that's the Light Seers deck, deck number 81 of my top 100 by Chris Ann. And do have a look at the Muse Tarot as well. Again, it's a very eclectic deck, and also by Chris Ann as well. Deck 82 in my top 100, where we're now looking at some more recent decks, i.e. within the last 10 years, which counts for recent for me at least, is the Venetian Tarot by Eugene Vinitsky, a Swiss artist, and his decks are brilliant. Absolutely stunning. I love his decks. I love the design, the artwork, the execution, the marketing of them, the packaging, the printing, the whole package. And the Venetian Tarot is my favourite of those because I just love Venice. And I think as well there is a sense in this deck that we have a good correlation with the Shakespearean nature of the Waite-Smith deck. So there is a natural home in Venice via the Shakespearean connection of the Merchant of Venice and other things that sort of draw on Venetian imagery within Shakespeare himself. So the Venetian Tarot, deck 82, I think it came out in 2019. I don't know how many of these have been printed. A small guidebook here. Again, the guidebooks are really well illustrated. This is 2017, so what's that now, 7 years ago. I've used this for a few readings so far, but it's back on my reading pile. There's a wonderful sense of historic knowledge, cultural knowledge, artistic knowledge that goes into the design of these decks. And it's nice shiny gold gilt. And let's see if I can draw that close so that we can see the Venetian imagery here. The Knave of Pentacles, the Knave and the Pentacles are down here. You can see the Queen of Cups. Queen of Wands. I was writing an article about these a while ago, so they're still in the order that I used for the article. King of Cups. Let's take a look somewhere in the middle. And the whole idea of masks I love. In fact, I was just recently framing a concert program from Hawkwind called, from their album Choose Your Masks, which dates me a little bit, I guess. The Nine of Swords, I love the shadow here. The fact that the swords are casting the shadow here. And then you've got the design element of the wall fresco, and then the figure at the bottom with the mask again. The masks are used to great effect in this deck, and obviously homage to Venetian architecture, culture, the Carnival, Two of Wands. We've got the globe here now instead of the world. And I just love the brave expression of this. Eugene isn't afraid to use a lot of space and a lot of colour for getting across the message. The Ten of Cups there is more sky than family because of its joy, possibility, and so forth. And again, we've got the shipbuilding element of Venice, in a sense, of it being a port. And that goes back to the 5 ports of Winchelsea, where Pamela Coleman-Smith first drew the Waite-Smith deck. So there's a lot of possibility. I love him reaching for the crown there in this deck. And I just wanted to find one of my favourite cards in this deck. Again, there's so much potential for storytelling with this deck, for real world situations, everyday situations. The times I've used it for real readings for clients and a couple of times for myself, it's been very, very easy to read, very, very accurate. I just wanted to find, again, with a lot of these decks now, I'm finding that a lot of the cards are my favourite cards and a lot of the decks are my all-time favourite decks as well, as soon as I see them again. So let's just be aware of that in this top 100, that any one of them could be a top one at any given time. Okay, so this one is my favourite card. The 10 of Wands. I just love the fact that he is carrying so many masks, that he's dropped some, that he's having difficulty holding them all, balancing all of these identities, the values, that the 10 of Wands symbolises you've taken on too many responsibilities or too many duties, too many values, beliefs, things that you're trying to make important in your life, but it's all overwhelming. And I just love the design of that, to go away from the wands and instead just use a multitude of masks to get across the core message of the card, the 10 of Wands. And then, of course, we've got the Venetian classic imagery in the background as well. There's a sense of a story of a tidying up after a carnival, perhaps, that is going on. This person has been given that role, maybe forced into that role, maybe taken on that role unwittingly, who knows, but the context of the reading will give us all of that to fill in how this fits into the story of somebody's life, someone's situation, challenge, problem, whatever it may be in their life that they're having the reading for. So this deck is entirely readable, and for those of us who love Venice as well, love history, love the culture, love the carnival, the imagery of the masks, let's try and get this in there. This deck is deck number 82 and very highly recommended as well. Venetian Tarot by Jungian Tarot. For deck 83, we have the Fountain Tarot, and I've been lucky enough to meet Jonathan, Jason, and Andy, the triumvirate that created this deck, and great people, wonderful artwork, wonderful design, and again, heaven forbid that you accidentally buy a rip-off of this deck, return it immediately, get a refund, report it if you do, because you will miss out on entirely the wonderful design of the deck, the actual texture of it, the fact that you are the voice and the breath of universes, the feeling of the deck in its design. Let me just take this out. So we've got the silver thread there, the ribbon to pull it out, and this is, you can't tell, we don't have touchy vision at the moment, but this is really textured and it just feels good to hold. So this is created by Jonathan, written by Jason, and designed by Andy. And we have wonderful key phrases: the star, all is well; the moon, surrender to darkness; the meaning, the reversals as well. And really, really packed, succinct guidebook for this. And the artwork is gorgeous. There's the back. So this sort of almost fractal, reflective design, geometric design. And then the artwork is geared just to be, it's like suggestive and allows you to read into the characters, to read into the story. So there's the fountaintarot.com website. Look at that wonderful Two of Swords, just the characterization of it, the background. And I love the use of light in this. Light, reflection, shadow. It's really intrinsically part of the design. There's the Five of Swords, the Knight of Wands, and the characters all have this sort of wonderful movement to them as well. And as I say, the actual artistic style allows us to read into them. It's not prescriptive, and that's what I like about this. Look at the fact that the Page of Swords, again, the use of light, reflection, opacity. It's just really well designed, and you can tell, again, with all of these decks, as I take them out to showcase them, they become my favourite deck of all time, each one of them as well. Because quite often you think everyone has done everything that can be done with tarot, and then the following day or the following hour, you realise that someone has done something really neat, new, innovative, inspiring with it. And that's what I also love about tarot. There's 10 of Swords there. Again, just look at the way the light is piercing that. And again, for those who have followed our Instagram with our Shakespearean sources for the deck coming from Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot, this is probably Pamela Colman Smith's design of a scene in a play, and the guy in the play is it was Cardinal Wolsey, I think, being stabbed many times by the knights, and it's in the story, it's in the play. I'm trying to remember who wrote the play, but anyhow, the story is very famous for him being actually stabbed in the head, and there's a old illustration of it with him being stabbed by the knights, and Pamela Colman Smith has put that in with the storm that came upon his death and so forth, and all of that is in the card, and it's picked up in this design as well. So it really honours the design and original intent of the Waite-Smith card, because it was meant to show the death of value, the death of belief and so forth, and betrayal as well. And that's in the design of the original card, and so this picks up on that as well, but then does something really neat and new with it, with the use of the artwork and design. It's both subtle and obvious at the same time, so it reads really well. You can already see from the movement, from the position of the figure, everything that you need to be able to read that as climbing high whilst also combating people, but also perhaps utilising and incorporating other people's critique of you as a support. Was it one of the lead singers of the band Kiss was being interviewed and said, yes, sometimes I swim around in one of these swimming pools that was bought for me by my critics, and I think that's talking about the publicity that can be got, and then as long as you don't take it to heart, you can actually use to build upon and improve where you're going to as well. So conquering by taking the high place and so forth. And again, good decks, good designs, good artwork allows you to immediately bridge to stories, to songs, to other narratives, to homespun truths and so forth. And look at the Hierophant there, which to me is all about revelation. And it's nice that the sunlight has caught my thumb at the bottom of that. If we actually put it through the light there. Yeah, isn't that strange? There's a nice synchronicity for us as the light comes in and reflects off the card itself. There we go. So we have the Hierophant. Again, you can't make up these synchronous moments of revelation of the light, and the light is actually reflected and pouring out of that card as we speak. And that's what's called a synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that happens when you're discussing something of revelation, vision, dream, or mystery, which is the more official, closer to Jung Jung's meaning of synchronicity. Sometimes people just take the meaningful coincidence bit of that, but synchronicity is only when you are already in the process of discussing, talking about, your attention is moved to something of your own vision, your own dream, your own inner world, and at that point a meaningful coincidence happens, and that's a true synchronicity. It isn't just a coincidence, or I was talking about that yesterday sort of thing. That is a coincidence, a synchronous coincidence, but it is not a synchronicity. Synchronicity is when we're already talking about vision and self-development, mysticism, something profound, and a meaningful coincidence happens at the same time that you are opening up to that, and that's a synchronicity in your personal sphere. So there we go. So that's the Hierophant. And this is deck number 83, the Fountain Tarot. And again, I think this was produced in the last 5 to 10 years as well. So I have used it for readings. I also use it for a bit of dream work on occasion. And now that I've showcased it again, I'm going to be using it a little bit more in the future. So that's deck number 83, the Fountain Tarot. Deck 84 could have appeared in our self-development section, I guess, or our dream section of this list. Let me just bring it up closer there. The Jungian Tarot by Robert Wang. And this is, I think it has been reprinted by US Games of late. This version is Marcus Aurelius Press. It's an earlier version. And Robert Wang wrote a really good book on the Golden Dawn Tarot. And this is the Jungian Tarot. It perhaps doesn't get as much love as it is due. And say this is day 84 in my list. And that is because it mainly sort of concentrates on the major arcana. Let's get the lighting right there. And then I'll show you why perhaps it doesn't get as much love as it should. I think the backs are gorgeous. You can see the alchemical nature of this. And the majors are really the major part of this deck. So we're really looking at the archetypes for the cards here. It's reasonably obvious what they are, perhaps a bit of closer glance. This is the Tower, the Devil. And it's very straight archetypal dreamlike symbolism in this deck. The Magician, again, really drawing on the alchemical nature of the deck. The union of sun and moon, anima and animus, very powerful imagery and archetypes in Jungian psychotherapy. Again, very dreamlike. The scale of things is very dreamlike. The Hermit's here. Again, concentrating more on the figure, the personage, rather than the lamp or the staff. Same with each of the cards. The Empress. And so forth. The Last Judgment. And the arch and the rainbow symbolism behind it. It's a very straightforward and simple deck. It isn't overloaded with symbols, so it becomes, I guess, archetypal in that nature. It's really bare down to the bones of the figures. But I think the reason it doesn't get a lot of love is because the minor arcana are very Marseille type. Again, there is alchemical, elemental, dream, some Jungian psychological symbolism in this, particularly with the colours and the relationship of the objects. But it isn't exactly the sort of deck that, unless you were comfortable with numerology, perhaps correspondences, the Kabbalistic process, or intuitive reading in its purest sense, or, for example, the Tarot de Marseille, that you might have difficulties reading with the minor arcana, because it isn't really a reading deck either, I would suggest. It can be very useful for self-reading, and that's how I've used it in the past, because I've used this just for self-reading. I don't think I've ever done a reading for a client or friend, family, using this deck ever. Don't think so. Because you have to let these really sink in. And they do have a profound effect if you do. This is a deck that, as I say, could go into the self-development category. Certainly it could go into the dream work category very easily. That's how I've used it on a couple of occasions. I quite often use tarot for dream work because that's one of my major methodologies. Yeah, so this is the Jungian Tarot. It's definitely my favourite deck whenever I'm using it, and it is deck 84 in my list of 100 favourite decks. I suppose rather than a top 100 favourite decks, we could just call it my 100 favourite decks, something like that. So that's the Jungian Tarot, and I do believe, I think it's published by US Games. I'll check that and maybe put it down here if that's the case. And that is deck number 84 of the list, the Jungian Tarot by Robert Wang. And whilst on the subject of dreams, psychology, Jungian work and so forth with the previous deck, deck 85 is the Alcheringa Deck, an Oneiromancy deck, a dream work deck. And it isn't a tarot deck, it's more of an oracle deck, but it is primarily an Oneiromancy deck, a dream working deck. And this is by Stephanie Alia, illustrated by Daniel Eef, and designed by Vanessa Bowen. And this is a really, really vibrant deck. It's one that I've used, and I think I've used with Charlotte Louise for reading, methodology, dream work, and so forth. And it is an oracle deck. I'll come back to the booklet in a second. And so it has dream-like imagery to it, and it's primarily used for dream work and for self-development work, interpretation. Have some interesting effects with the light at the moment, so I'll just hold it over here. Again, there we go. Actually, be better just there. So this reminds me of a dream I used to be plagued with, a recurring dream when I was a very, very young child, of a massive disc trying to roll down a slope on me that I was always running away from. So that's the chasing, that's obviously the reverse of that sort of dreamlike sense of being chased, running, chasing something, going upstairs that you can't get to the top of, all of that sort of thing that can happen in a dream, excitement, reaching out for things, the wasteland, and so forth. So you can see again why I might like this deck, because it has that dreamlike landscape that Pamela Coleman-Smith also put into the Waite-Smith deck. And so it allows us to make a dreamlike narrative. For example, we might have a dream about something, and then we use this deck, and it turns out that that symbol in the dream is actually part of the gift for us, that we should see it as a gift within the dream. And this also comes back to the inner guide meditation that I've done separate videos for, and the inner guide meditation, this is a good deck to use with that, because It's working with inner dynamics, for example, shame, dream lover, loss. Again, I love the design and imagery of this. It's very vibrant. You can imagine a dream where all of your teeth are falling out, for example. It's a sense of loss. Robbery. It doesn't have to be a financial robbery. Fear. Flying, of course, one of the most common supernatural elements of dreams. Dwellings. Again, it's got its own landscape, its own language and so forth. The only critique I'd have, just for myself, and it's a very easy one to resolve, is that the guidebook for this has really, really small text. Sorry, again, the light's sort of playing around here. But you can see, particularly if you're wearing glasses, I can just imagine, it's difficult to read. It's just difficult to read, but what you can do, of course, is just scan it and then enlarge it on your computer screen just to read it. And to some extent, this is less useful in a sense than the images themselves. I'm not decrying the text, of course, but this is a deck that really does have these dreamlike images that are fairly obvious in themselves and then can be interpreted and taken in your own style, in the light of your own dreams and so forth. So this is a interesting deck because it's specifically designed for dream work, and as I just mentioned, dream work is something that I do a lot of and recommend to my students and members of our magical order and so forth, that it's something that can get very useful, interesting, dynamic, magical results in a safe, enclosed environment. It can be very distressing, disturbing. Dream work can really change things very dynamically and so forth, but it's a good first step in the magical system. And there we have dancing. So this is deck number 85. It's a very interesting deck to work with. You can perhaps do readings, but it's good for doing readings with dreams as well, and that's the Alcheringa Deck. Stephanie Alia, designed by Vanessa Bowen, illustrated by Daniela Efe, or Effie. Okay, and that's deck number 85. Deck number 86 is the Zombie Tarot. There's a surprise for you, and it'll be even more surprising to learn that this has a very specific use, or is one that Tali Goodwin introduced me to at a TarotCon event when she was using this for a health reading. This is a really visceral deck. It's a horror-themed deck, zombies, but because it's all about the body and almost body horror, and zombies are literally flesh with no life, flesh with no brains, the undead, this deck is actually, in secret, a really powerful health reading deck. And it may be not one that you might necessarily use with a client unless you felt that that client was open to it and you checked in with them first, because health readings are they have to be done in a very considered manner at all times, and certainly no replacement for expert medical advice. They're to be taken in the context of all of the other advice and common sense that you might have about a situation. But the Zombie Tarot is a really good one for health reading, and I'm just trying to find the designer or artist, Stacey Graham and Headcase Design. And I think this is in the same range as the Housewife's Tarot, which is also, again, it's not managed to make it in my top 100 list, but it certainly gets a note here. The Housewife's Tarot is a really fun deck to use and read with as well. So this is the Zombie Tarot, deck number 86. And let's just take a look at the guidebook, which is, again, the design of this is just on point, as the kids say. So let's have a look. Put that there. The moon and the sun. The rescue team have arrived with the sun. You're foiling a hostile takeover by the undead. You've earned a one-way ticket to a safer place. So I just love the in-world design of this, and it keeps itself within its own world. The Broken Heart, again, for real visceral readings, this deck is, if you'll pardon the pun, a killer. So let's take a look at some of the cards. And the sort of Mystic Zoltar is on the back of these, but a zombified version of that. So again, it keeps it in world and in theme. And a bit like the Housewives deck, is it like the 30s or the 50s, the sort of general style of it? These almost look like holiday posters. Just start to put these somewhere where we can see them properly. So the 10 of Cups, everything looks beautiful, but obviously in the distance we've got chaos. Reminds me of one of the PC zombie games that is set on a holiday resort, which again is so jarring and so visceral that it really gives you a good way of reading. 7 of Hazards, the Star, interesting use of the Star, the Tower. We see outside the tower, but also inside the zombie apocalypse starting. The Devil, Vice is written on there, cigarette machine. And again, this is really, really full of interesting little design tweaks, and it's a very, very good deck for health readings if you are prone to do those. 7 of Wands there. And say it's a very visceral deck of the Fool, and it's really stylish as well, which I like in a deck. I like elegant design. The Empress, the Emperor, and so forth. So the 4 of Hazards. It's an in-world deck that takes itself seriously within the world, but it's also got a sense of humour to it, and it makes it very good for all sorts of readings, even relationship readings. If you want a deck that sort of tells it how it is in a very visceral manner, then number 86, the Zombie Tarot, is the deck for you. Deck number 87 is an Il Melangalo deck from Milan, La Corte de Tarrochi, the Heart of the Tarot, and its design is Anna Maria de Onfrio, 1999. Been lucky enough to attend the shop and meet Mr. Mengele when he was alive. And this is a deck that I use on occasion for special readings for people, birthday readings on occasion, 3-card, 5-card readings, demonstration readings as well. I use this deck for, and it's just a beautiful design. I'm just trying to get them all out here, because they are really thin cards. The design, the box is very, very high quality, as you would expect. The cover has the actual stamp on it. That's a proper stamp, not just printed on. And these are unusual in their thinness, sort of design. They're on very thick cardstock, and again, fortunately, we don't have feeler vision, but these are really well textured. They're almost waxy. 4 of Wands. And you can see why I use this perhaps as a demonstration deck when I'm demonstrating a method, particularly with spreads and so forth, or reading techniques. This is just a gorgeous deck, Very simple in its design, very classy, very elegant. It really sort of comes back to the Marseille tradition, almost reinvents it. But it allows you, particularly I use this when I'm teaching the 3-minute method, or the 10-minute method, the slightly longer method of learning how to use tarot, 10-minute method, which uses the position of the suit, the number of the suit, and so forth. So the 5 of Cups, it's literally halfway through emotions, so it's the halfway point. You're neither one thing nor the other, and we've got that in the design as well. So it's a very easy way of teaching tarot. It may appear, again, on the surface that that's actually a difficult thing. People somehow say that reading Marseille, for example, or pick cards is very difficult, but actually in 10 minutes the Tarosophy method will show you exactly how to read that. And I teach it to beginners so that I can show them this deck to begin with in the first class, and then 10 minutes later have them read any question, any spread, any layout of cards using this deck that previously just seemed non-transparent to them, a complete mystery. And it's good to teach it that way, because then people have that immediate insight on it's not difficult. I can read the cards and so forth. It's a bit like chess, I think, tarot. It's the rules you can learn in 10 minutes, 3 minutes quickly, an hour perhaps, with a little bit more of the rules in, but then you spend the rest of your life learning the actual chess, learning all of the different variations of it and all the things you can do with chess, and it still has surprises and so forth, and it takes you the rest of your life to even attempt to master it. So that's the way I tend to approach tarot with the Tarosophy method, is teach it in 3 minutes and then tell the person they now have the rest of their life to continue learning. I don't like to make it seem difficult to begin with, because that's not what it is. 3 of Swords, 8 of Pentacles, and so forth. And see, this is a gorgeous, stylish deck, and it just allows us to use it to teach methods. It's one of the majors. And then the person can feel, the student can feel, particularly someone new to tarot, that they mastered the tarot really quickly, and then you can build on that once they've got that confidence. I don't like this, give me 78 days to teach you tarot, because it's really complicated and you'll have to work hard to master it and so forth. I prefer to do it the other way around, and this deck is one I use for that, and that is, it's one of my favourite decks, deck 87, La Corte de Tarrochi, Il Meningalo deck from Milan. And I can't remember the price of these, but they are beautifully produced and well worth it if you can get hold of a copy. There's a little booklet that comes with it, but it's not very detailed at all. It's just about the studio, I think. But you don't need that if you're using one of the 10-minute Tarosophy methods to learn it. So that's La Corte de Tarrochi, 87 in the list. Now, the final 3 decks in this video are part of my top 100, starting with number 88, the Baroque Tarot by Lamucci Design. I hope it's Lamucci or Lamucci. Lamucci Design, 2022. So this is a comparatively recent deck, the Baroque Tarot. So these 3 decks, I haven't used as much, but I love them already. And again, never buy any rip-off versions of these, because you'll miss the wonderful design as well as it being illegal. Of this deck calls the user to care for their soul with much love, to open their heart and mind to learn their lessons and better themselves, to have faith that all will unravel as it should. The Baroque Tarot deck. So again, the design of this, the bottom of the box even has design in it. It's thoroughly well designed, well executed. It keeps to its theme. Gold gilt, gold backs. The camera's going to struggle with these. And the booklet is in colour. We have the zodiacal astrological correspondences right and reversed. A bit more about the reversed at the bottom as well as the keywords at the top, which is a nice touch. And the fact that they're in colour as well, so they're instantly recognisable what card you're looking at. I think that's quite cool. That's the art director, Esra Mert. So let's take a look at the cards. And again, because I haven't used this as much, I can't really comment much on the cards other than it immediately made it into my top 100. It's very Waite-Smith, but has a very powerful twist on it. Let's see if I can avoid the lighting. I'll put them more over this side here. There we go. So the Magician. That's the Tower. Again, you can see that these are very Waite-Smith designed, but they're very Baroque, and I just love that for this deck. Queen of Pentacles. I'm going to struggle a little bit with the reef because there's different layers of reflection on the cards themselves. Look at the little bunny down there. And so I think a lot of the decks that we've been looking at in this video and the next video, perhaps, they are similar in design, artwork, intent, perhaps, to some of the other decks that we've looked at earlier. For example, this reminds me of the Golden Tarot by Cat Black, but that just tells you more about my own predilections with artwork, with design and so forth, and not necessarily something about the cards themselves. So this I would like to use for its artwork. There's the Eight of Cups, just as a variation to the Waite-Smith Tarot, without straying too far from what I know about the Waite-Smith Tarot. So this deck will allow me to do that and just break my habitual return to the Waite-Smith Tarot itself. And I like having a few decks around like that I can actually feel parallel to the Waite-Smith. It's a bit like the Thoth. Some of the decks that perhaps bridge off the Thoth, like the Liber M, Moline's decks and so forth, I like to use those sometimes just to give me a separate break and a new angle to just not avoiding my head settling in one particular deck for too long, sometimes for years and years. That's a bit of a dangerous thing with tarot, I think. I mean, it's a good thing as well. If you just have one deck, you only ever use one deck, and that's the deck you use, all power to you. That's a great thing, but that's not the way I tend to approach things just for myself. So this is the Baroque Tarot, deck number 89. Deck number 88. I've not used this as much as yet because this is just part of my current phase of reading cycle of having some of these new decks in that phase. So I'll perhaps get back to you in about 10 years when I've used it a little bit more and we can discuss it in a bit more detail as well. So that's deck number 88. The Baroque Tarot deck. Now, deck number 89 is one that you may not have come across, and it is the Tarot de Monde Perdu, the Tarot of the Drowning World by Fledermaus Workshop. And this is, again, it's an in-world design with Dr. Falk's Tarot of the Drowning World. And an augury deck in the style of the Tarot de Marseille by Messrs. Falk and Orosky. But the design, and it comes with a wonderful book here, Tarot de Monde Perdu by Sarah Faulkner. And the images are by Kahn and Selznick. And this is a way over the top, better than it has any right to be, deck. It's just a gorgeous deck, and it has a in-world Madame Lulu, who is the sort of owner of the deck, the spirit behind it, and each of the cards comes with both a medicine and a poison, in effect a upright and reversed meaning, medicine and a poison. So again, when you think that tarot has reached its end, its imaginative borders, then someone comes along and does something totally wacky with it, really interesting, really profound, and that's what I particularly love about this deck. Now, there are actually two decks that could have gone here. There's the Carnival at the End of the World. This deck here, the Carnival at the End of the World. Again, it's a sort of another in-world design, but the one that I've chosen for 89 is the first one that they produced, the Tarot of the Drowning World. And you'll see why in a moment. Again, the box has a wonderful design to it in world. It's flowers. It contains a lot of flower botanical imagery. Get it out of the box. It's always difficult to get this one out of the box. And I love the fact that, again, in the box, it's the drowning world. We actually have, it's like plants or roots underwater, and that's then picked up on the back of the cards as well. You can see how that looks when you spread them. So again, gorgeous design, a lot of thought gone into this, a lot of consideration. A nice interpretation for the batons of wands, coupes of cups, and so forth, épées of swords, and so forth. But then let's take a look at these cards. I'm going to put them over here so that the light isn't confusing it. And a lot of these are photographs. So it's so way over the top, so detailed. There's so much work gone into this. And I just love the design of it. That, for example, is the Four of Cups. I was just double checking. It's down at the bottom there in the text, you can see. And it has this whole drowning world mythos to it. There we have the 26th card, because there are more than the majors. There's more of everything to this deck. It's rich, it's lush, it's vibrant, and it's one I'm looking forward to reading with. I think this was a Kickstarter. I seem to recall this was a Kickstarter. But the design was, it's just absolutely so overblown, so detailed, so rich, luscious, and everything. I think that's Madame Lulu, is that right? Yep, Madame Lulu, one of the extra cards. And the cards, again, you can't tell from the video, but these are textured. They're sort of woven texture in the cards themselves. And this is a deck that I just want to immerse myself into, quite literally. That's why it's deck number 89, but it's not one I've used a lot yet. But you can tell everything is made of flowers. Even the meaning of every flower has a meaning, and their combination has a meaning, and the actual design of them has a meaning as well. So this is a deck that just really intrigued me. And much like any of my top 100 decks, it might not be the sort of deck that you might like or you might really love. And there might be decks that you have that I just can't read and you'd be able to read really well. Yeah, I'm going to change the lighting in a second just for our last card as the sun moves across us. Okay, so that is deck number 89, the Tarot of the Drowning World. And I believe it's still available. That's Carnan Silesnek. And I can't remember when this came out. It was quite recently, comparatively recently, like within the last few years. So I'm sure you'll be able to get a copy if you go looking for it. And that's Fledermaus Workshop. And finally, for deck number 90, we have the Gold Lyre Tarot. And this is a contemporary invite the divine feminine and modern gender fluid expression into your divination practice with the Gold Lyre Tarot. It's Microcosm Publishing, and it picks up on the idea of the lyre as the instrument of Apollo, and Apollo was the god of divination, of course. So the Gold Lyre Tarot, it's again a very contemporary deck. I've not used this at all as yet. I think I've used it for a couple of readings just to get used to it. And it's a deck that I'm going to start to be using quite soon, so I'll get back to you in about 10 years when I've used it enough to have some valid opinion on it. And so, again, it's beautifully produced. It talks about Apollo and the lyre and Hermes. We hope this deck will serve as your personal unique lyre, holding songs and messages only you can hear. Trust that song and lift others with her tune. And so it's beautifully designed. Again, one of the decks I immediately fell in love with as soon as I saw it. And again, high production value. It has colour images and keeps to its font. Just get that closer so you can see it there. Aleister Crowley said, "Every man and every woman is a star." For the star. If your beliefs do not hold authentic validity, they will collapse. Reminds me of a biblical saying, they that build their house without building it in the name of the Lord, build it in vain. And so that's really what that's picking up on there, in a contemporary manner. So, yeah, I just love the design of this. I love the diversity of it, I guess. And it's a deck that I want to start using quite soon for everyday readings for clients and so forth. And again, I just love the sparsity of the design, the courage to actually go with a simple design that is simple and deep and complex all at the same time. It takes a lot to trust your almost editing of things to not make them overwrought, overdone, and this deck manages that very well. So the Eight of Cups, and you can see obviously the Waite Smith design ethos in here, but it has its own flavour as well. The Nine of Cups, Ten of Cups, which I think on the cover or the back of the box, Ace of Pentacles. So it's a nice, simple, modern, clean design. I think I like the sort of clean design of this. And the fact that we have a feminine presenting figure on the king is great, because it's always difficult to have to explain. It can be a masculine energy, a feminine energy, but a male body, and so forth and so forth, when this just breaks that down already and makes it far more fluid and gender-less in that sense, or gender-rich perhaps. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to using this, and I can't really, again, talk much about it other than the obvious allusions to the Waite Smith, but also the differences, the troublesome Hierophant here. It's perhaps less troublesome for some people. and so forth. So again, I'm really looking forward to using this for some of my client readings in the near future. So if you're having a reading from me at any point in the next year or so, next 10 years, then you may well find yourself with this deck. Again, just love the movement, the energy in it, and the clearness of design. It says what it means, and then it gets on to the next card, and that's... I had a occult teacher once upon a time who was just like, I used to love ceremony and ritual and so forth, and he was more like, you set up the temple, you get into the temple, you do the work, you get out again. That's it. In, out, and no shouting about was his methodology, whereas I like the overwrought nature of ceremony, ritual and magic. And I think this is, I think this would have appealed to him actually, because it just does what it says, and then it leaves you with that, because you don't need to say too much else. An Umberto Eco quote comes to mind: the truth is brief, the rest is merely commentary. I think it's a biblical saying to begin with, but this reminds me of that. The truth is brief, the cards are brief, and the rest is just your interpretation and commentary on the message they've already given you. So if you want a straight message, I think this is going to be a good deck, certainly for me, to be able to give that to clients, and then not to have to explain all of the other symbolism or try and get out of the answer by looking at other things on the card itself, which can be a design flaw sometimes with cards, that if the designer hasn't thought about it, then they'll put not just multivalent symbols, but contradictory symbols on the same image. And that can be quite troublesome when you're trying to read for a client, particularly if they know a bit about tarot, because they'll look at it and say, oh yeah, but I think you might be reading that the wrong way around, because wouldn't that image there mean such and such? And then they try and sneak their way out of the answer that should be given, that the oracular moment is saying, and so forth. And this doesn't really give you much opportunity to do that. It just says it as it is, and then moves on, which I think I'm going to like about this deck. So that is deck 90 in my top 100. Again, they're all my top deck when I'm using them. And what I'm going to do is not do Le Normand in the top 100, as I was playing around with to begin with. The next 10, the final 10 in this top 100, will also be tarot and oracle decks, and basically be a mop-up for any of my favourite decks that I haven't managed to include so far, limiting it to 100. And then I'm going to do a top 5 Le Normand decks as its whole separate video, so I'll do that separately. So if you've got any questions about Le Normand as well, then drop them in the comments below, and I'll try and answer those in the video once I come to that video after I've done the final of the top 100, which will be episode 10, I guess, decks 91 to 100, and I'll be doing that perhaps in the next video. So thank you again for sticking with me, and as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop.